Today we come to the end of our series that we've called Be Rich. It's how to be rich, not how to get rich. I know some of you would like that one, but we'll keep that for another day. And at the end of the service, we've been talking about four different charities over the last few weeks, and you've been putting balls in the sort of thing. So we heard from Bus Shelter, from Food Bank, from Hazard Alley, and today we should have been hearing from a charity dealing with child bereavement, but they were ill so couldn't make it. And so we've been asking you, or we're going to ask you at the end of this service, that we all give £10, and on your seat today there's an envelope. If you haven't got a £10 note with you, and no cash isn't very popular nowadays, and you can write your information on there, and also we'll have text number that you can send that to as well, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go through. If you're a guest with us and you don't know what that's all about, forget it, don't worry. Just enjoy your time with us today. Hello? Over this series, we've been looking at a few verses in a book called Timothy. Paul, who wrote quite a section of the New Testament, he wrote a few letters to pastors to help them to know how to live and how to be and what they should teach the church. One of the pastors was called Timothy, and the other guy was called Titus. And we've been looking over this last little while at 1 Timothy 6 and a few verses at the end there. And what we've been talking about is, in Timothy's day and in this day, that we found that most of us are probably a little bit richer than we think we are. But the problem is we don't feel like we're rich, yes? And when we get richer or where we have more money, then our hopes can sometimes move from God to wealth. We've got our hope in God, but when we get more stuff and we get more wealth and we get more things, then we can start to feel our hope migrating that little bit. And the time I remember most really was when I was at Bible college. When I first started work, the day before I started work, I wasn't earning anything. I had no money. And the day I started work, my first wage was £50 a week working for a building society. You can't believe you get £50 a week, yes, nowadays, but a long time ago. And the interesting thing was I didn't have any money, and then I got £50 a week, which should be like a fortune, shouldn't it? If you come from 0 to 50, that's a lot of money. But within about a month, £50 a month wasn't enough to live on, because I wanted to spend it on more stuff. Come on, guys. Have you ever had that experience? You get the promotion, you get that new job, and then you've still managed to fill that gap. And when I went to Bible college, we really didn't have any money there. In fact, I've got a photo to prove it. This is a photo of me at Bible college. And if I had any money, I certainly wouldn't have dressed like that, would I? I was taking some time at Pontins and doing some work for them. And I still like them hush puppies, to be honest with you. But the more stuff that we get, left college and we get more. Sorry guys, can I have a little bit more light up here? Because I'm not going to be able to read what's on my notes at all whatsoever. And that might be a good thing for you, I don't know. But Fowler helped us to understand last week that I will not place my trust in riches, but in him who richly provides. I won't place my trust in riches, but in him who richly provides. And I think there's certain things that we can do which will help us to not trust or not migrate our hope from Jesus to wealth. The first thing is give it away. Give something away. There's a story in the Bible about the widow who came and gave everything. We call it the widow's mite. She gave any that she had. What I do know is that widow, when she gave everything that she had no choice but to trust in God, yes? You're looking at me a bit weird again. She had no choice. I mean, if you give away, have you ever given away? I've never given away everything. I haven't, to be honest with you. But when you give away, then you need to place your trust in God that he's going to meet that need. Maybe you give away a little bit more than you think you can afford, or you're generous to somebody around about. The second thing is that I think we've got, in money and time and talent and treasure, I think we've got to discipline our leisure time. We always say we're really busy, but we seem to spend longer on Facebook and Twitter and watching binge watching umpteen episodes of something on Netflix, yes? And I think when we just keep on binge watching, keep on satisfying ourselves, our own wants, and we don't take some of the time that we've got to invest into other people's lives to give that away, yes? This is not going down well, is it? Shall we start again? Right. Because it's all about us and what we can get out of life. The other thing I think we can do to help us to keep our trust in God is that we teach our kids how to look after wealth, for how them to be rich with their time, their talent, and their treasure. When you teach somebody else, it convicts you, yes? And we've also got to remind ourselves very often that we are maybe comparatively rich. Fowler shared with us some figures about if you're earning £15,000, you're in the top 5% of the world. But I found a little thing this week on the Telegraph website that looked at just the UK. And if you, the average salary around about in UK now is about £25,000. And if you earn £25,000 in the UK, that puts you in the top 7% of earners. Would you believe that? So, we've got to remind ourselves. And today, as we wrap up our series, and we go back and look again at what Paul tells Timothy about how he should teach rich people to live their lives, I think we bump into something that's really key for us and helps us to understand how generous a Christian should be. And it helps us to understand why Christians are generous. And we hit this little thought. Verse 17 of Timothy 6. Paul speaking to Timothy, he says, the pastor, Timothy was the pastor at Ephesus, command those who are rich in this present world. Now that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? In this present world. Is there a non-present world? Why didn't Paul just say, command those who are rich? Well, Paul is suggesting there's more to this life than just this life. And he was saying, we've got this thing called the present life, or this life. And that's where you're all living now, or most of us live, yes? I often tell my kids, you're not living in the real world. But anyway, that's a different story. We've got this life, and we've got the next life. We've got eternity. He's making clear that we that know God have got this life, and we've got next life. So we go to verse 17 again. It says, command. Interesting to note that the word Paul uses for Timothy there, he says, command those who are rich. He didn't say, beg those who are rich. He didn't say, suggest to those who are rich. He says, command those who are rich. And what? In this present world, not to be arrogant, nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. You know, a number of years ago, probably, I don't know, late 80s, beginning of 90s, I can't remember exactly when it happened, but me and Nicola, we bought our first house in 88 when we got married, and I used to work in mortgages and properties. So when the Citizen came through your door, most of you probably don't even remember this now, there used to be the property section inside. And you got the property out, and you looked at all the properties you wish you had, rather than the property you had. But I used to follow my house, or houses like mine, in the paper. And so we bought it for, I think it was 55,000 or something like that. And it started going up each month. And it went up as high at one point as nearly £90,000 for this. Now, you're all thinking, I wish I could buy a £90,000 house now, aren't you? But this was a long time ago when Noah was still around. So it went up and up and up to about £90,000. And then there was a thing, I don't remember, it was Black Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, I don't know. But there was a huge crash and house prices slashed overnight. I mean, it was horrendous. And it went from 90,000 to 45,000. I'd been in this house for 10 years. And it was worth less than I bought it for. I mean, it was just crazy. And so, it doesn't matter what you do, wealth is unsteady and uncertain. And it can shake and move. But put your hope in God, who doesn't shake and doesn't move and never has a Black Friday or a Tartan Thursday or whatever it is, who richly provides us with everything, I love this, everything for our enjoyment. God's not a killjoy. He gives us everything that we need in our lives for our enjoyment. Verse 18, command, second time, no begging, no suggesting, command them to do what? To do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. So then he lands the plane saying it in this way, verse 19. In this way, in which way? By being rich in doing good works, being generous and willing to share, they, by doing that, will lay up treasure for themselves. And I can hear you say, wait a minute, Billy, if you're going to give everything away, how can you be storing up treasure for yourself? Because when you give something away, you're poorer, yes? So this is what he's saying, but you're laying up treasure for yourself. He not only says it to Timothy, but he also says it to the other pastor, Titus, that he writes to. Third chapter of Titus in verse 8, it says, the saying is trustworthy, and I want you to insist on these things so that those who have believed in God may be careful to devote themselves to good works. These things are excellent and profitable, so if you devote yourself to good works, it's profitable for you. You might be giving up time, you might be giving away some money, but it's profitable for you. And let our people learn to, it's that word again, devote themselves to good works so as to help cases of urgent need and not be unfruitful. So if you do that, it stands to reason you will be fruitful. What does it say in them verses? It says, devote themselves. It doesn't say, phone up Pastor Mark and get him to help out. You with me? It's not, I wonder what the church will do about this need. Because we are the church, yes? And he said, insist, command them, insist that they devote themselves to doing good deeds and meeting urgent needs. Isn't that? Okay, maybe it's just me, but to devote ourselves to do that. It's a choice that we decide to do that. It's a choice that we decide to turn off Netflix and go and visit somebody. It's a choice that we open our wallet and give somebody some money. So they will, in this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for what? The coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Paul points us in the direction of something that Jesus talked about all the time. There's more to this life than this life. There's the next life. And in this life, God gives us the tools and the opportunities to make a difference in that life. He gives us tools and opportunities. So what's the tools? Finance, time, talent. He gives us all these tools in this life so that first of all, we can make a difference in people's lives in this life, but we're making a difference in our life in the next life, yes? That's what he says. Jesus talked about this sort of stuff all the time. And Paul really takes what he's saying to Timothy directly from Paul. And Paul's probably sat with Peter and John and Matthew and probably Mary, the mother of Jesus, and he listened and picked up to what Jesus was talking about. And the one thing I do know, reading through the Gospels many times, is that almost every time when Jesus talked about money, he would connect it to eternity. He had to change people's view about wealth by connecting it to eternity. He said, if you will view your wealth through the lens of eternity, you will lose your grip on it, and it will lose its grip on you. Now, in this present age is your opportunity, and there's more at stake than we can ever imagine. And one day, Jesus was talking to his disciples, and an argument breaks out. And there's an argument in the crowd about greed, about being greedy. And somebody is accusing somebody else about being greedy. And Jesus tells one of his stories. We call them parables, but they're just stories that he uses to make a point or explain something. So in Luke 12, verse 16, he says, and he told them a parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Now we have a rich guy who's now got extra riches. He's already rich, and he's got more riches, so he's well off. And the farmer has extra. Have you ever been in a situation where suddenly, out of nowhere, you get extra into your life? No? One or two of us? I remember years ago when I was working for a company, we got called into a meeting, and we'd done very well throughout the year. And at that meeting, they gave us a check for quite a nice sum of money. And so I got the check and went home. And you know, one of my problems is going to John Lewis's. Okay. Maybe for most blokes. John Lewis, first floor. Electrical area. It's got all sorts of beautiful things in there. And so I've been walking around John Lewis for years, coveting this sound system. I don't even think they make sound systems anymore. It's called Technics, and it had everything in it. It even had a record player. I didn't have any records even then, but I wanted this. And when I got this money, my first thought was, that's it, John Lewis, here we come. And so, because I had a crappy little Amstrad thing, and I wanted something that was beautiful. And so I went and got it, took it home, and realized, with the kids knocking around and everything, that actually I needed something to put it in so it cost me more money for a cabinet to put it in. Anybody else done anything like this before? There was no thought in my mind that I had extra, and I needed to give something to somebody else. Bad man. But I think a lot of us have been in that place. And so verse 17, he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. I'm already rich. I've got more crops than I know what to do with it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I haven't got any room. Some of us are jealous now, aren't we? We think we could do with extra. I was asking God for an example of how I could explain this not being able to fit anything into your barns, and God spoke to me and said, Billy, it's just like your wife Nicola's wardrobe. There's no room for any more clothes in it. And the guy was really smart. He built new barns. Nicola was even smarter. She just used my wardrobe. I'll tell you the truth, man. Verse 18. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus gains. See, he was saying, I'll save it now and consume it later. He was living under the lie by saying, if it came to me, it must be for me. If it came to me, it must be for me. And I had extra. Now I've got extra, that when I need extra, I've saved extra, so I can get it when I need extra. You with me? I've confused myself. There's a program on TV that I love watching. It's called American Picker. Have you ever seen that program? It's about these guys who go around America, going to outback places where people have stored stuff all their lives in big barns and houses, and you go to their house and their barn and you can't move for stuff. Some of it's been there for 40 years and they haven't done anything with it, but they're just hoarders and collectors, and they've got to have more, but they don't do anything with it, and they go around trying to pick out some decent things out of it. They went to see this guy once. His house was full of stuff, and they looked around at it. He said, do you want to come and see the school? And they went, what? This guy had so much stuff that he not only filled his house and his barn, he bought a school in the town that was closing down and filled every classroom with stuff. Man, incredible. So he says to himself, you will have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Yes, I'd love that. And if Jesus had stopped the parable there, we'd be saying, isn't that a great lesson on saving? He's saving a pension for his retirement. It's a good thing to do. And the Old Testament teaches us that we should care for our future. But everybody in Jesus' audience thinks this guy is a smart guy. In the culture, it's assumed that since he was wealthy, he must have been pleasing God. He was good. He had no sin in his life, so God rewarded him with money. And people who didn't have money, well, they probably sinned somewhere along the way, and God had caused that to happen in their life. You see, they saw circumstances as evidence of God's favor. We have to be so careful, because circumstances aren't an evidence of God's favor. Sometimes people come and say to me, oh, this is going on in my life and that's going on. God must be displeased with me or whatever. Circumstances, take Job for instance. All his things he went through weren't because God was displeased with him. Now God taught him through the process, yes. But just because we have difficult circumstances doesn't mean God's displeased with us. So everybody's listening, everybody thinks, oh, this guy is great. Verse 20, but God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. Fool. He was wealthy, he got wealthier. He's thinking, I can't run out of time before I run out of wealth. He says, you fool. And God asks him a question, or the story asks a question. Verse 20, then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Well, the simple answer is somebody else. You've got it all in this life, but who's going to have it? Because you know what? Everybody leaves the same amount. Everything. You with me? We all leave the same amount. We get no credit in the kingdom for what we invest in this life in that way for ourselves. And Jesus' audience is disturbed because this is messing with their paradigm and he doesn't understand. And Jesus speaks to his audience to help them to apply the parable. He said, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. Now, the idea of being rich in those days, towards God in those days, was because they would serve Zeus or some god, and what they would do is they would go to the temple and they would take something that was valuable to them and they would leave it in the temple before Zeus or sacrifice it to whoever the god was to try and bribe God to do some good things in their lives. So that being rich to them was taking stuff and leaving it to the God. You with me? Well, Jesus changes all this around. See, what he's saying is, if you want to be rich towards God, then you must be generous towards the people that God created. It's not about leaving something in front of God. It's about you do something for the people that were made in the image of God. Did you get that? Don't take something to the front for me. Do something for people made in my image. You've received me into your life, and you can be something. You know things are different. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Verse 19 again, this way they lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age. When we invest in other people's lives, when we're generous in this life, we invest in the next life. It's 20 years ago tomorrow when I was with my mum when she died of cancer. And she went through a number of days beforehand when I was with her, when she was struggling with that whole thing and the morphine was making her delirious. And she kept on saying to me, I wish I could have had 40 years. I wish I could have had 40 years, just one more year. And I didn't understand, and I said to my dad, what's this? Well, you see, Billy, she's been teaching Sunday school for 39 years. And she wishes she could have one more year to teach kids about Jesus. My mom had anything she wanted in this world. But the most important thing was not the stuff that she had. It was teaching kids about Jesus. When you invest in this life, you're storing up treasure in the next life. And today we're going to do that as well, with the £10 that we're going to give to the charities that we've talked about. And we're going to take the money and we're going to give it all away. You've got some cards on your seats, and you can fill that in. There'll be a number behind me for a text if you can't do that. If you're texting, just put on the card text and come up, or IOU or whatever. We're going to have some baskets here. Put it in and make sure you give us that later. However it is, and I want us all to do something different. Starting from this block over here, and one block at a time, I'd love us to walk up, go to that side of the stage. I'd like for us to hold the envelope in our hand and walk past this life and walk towards the next life. And I want you today to invest that £10. If you're a guest with us, just ignore it, just sit down. To invest that £10 to not in yourself, but to invest in the next life. Is that okay? Are we going to stand? Let's stand. The band are going to lead us